Farah Hannoun for MMA Junkie, and I'm joined by UFC featherweight Josh Emmett. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How's everything going? How are you coping during these tough times? I've seen you've got a pretty sweet setup in your garage.
Yeah, everything's going pretty well, given the circumstances. I'm just kind of doing my part and doing what I can do, So I'm trying to stick to the same type of routine as far as like my schedule goes, with like when the times I eat, and then instead of me getting ready going to practice, I just either I go do a one-on-one with a coach, or I go for a run, or work out in my garage with I have some bags and stuff like that. So trying to do my best, but yeah, I'm just hoping this is over before you know sooner than later, and we can get back to somewhat of our normal life.
And the UFC, of course, we were supposed to go ahead with UFC 249, and then they had to pull the plug on everything. What was your reaction to that? And were you surprised?
Um, I wasn't. With that too, with it being at the Tachi Palace in Lemoore, that's only like a 3.5 hour drive from Sacramento. So man, I was hoping to possibly be a part of it, because I know Dana White and the UFC rented that out for 2 months. I was like, if I get some type of opportunity, maybe I could hop on that and be kind of a part of history. Um, with it being canceled, I understand, just because the governor, he called the higher ups at Disney and ESPN, and they asked Dana White to stand down. But I do feel like the UFC was taking, necessary precautions. I heard they were going to, how they were going to be testing all the athletes before, during, after, and it was going to be a safe environment. But I think they might have got too much backlash and just bad press, or whatever you want to call it. So they decided to stand down. But if that Fight Island is going to be a real thing, I would love to be a part of that, possibly.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Dana was saying that he expects that to be ready in a month, and he's planning on shipping fighters over there. What's your take on all that? And would you be willing to compete on Fight Island?
Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah, no, I would love to be a part of that. The more I think about it too, just when we look back at this time, in 2020, during this, COVID pandemic, just to say, the entire sports world was shut down. And if I were able to compete and fight during this time, and be able to make some money, that would be great. But yeah, no, I would be willing to fight on it. I just would like to hear more info before committing to anything, and just kind of seeing where it's at, kind of what the setup's like, and things like that. But people know me. I'll never shy away from opportunity.
And before the lockdown, your name was linked to in a fight with Edson Barboza, and I know there wasn't an entire element of truth to that on your side, because they just didn't come to you with it, right? Like, what happened with the Edson Barboza fight, and why was it out early? Did they offer you that fight at all, or did you find out about it through those social media announcements and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, when my wife and I were in Vietnam, my manager, he asked me, just because the UFC threw out a name, and they're like, hey, they were wondering if you wanted to fight Edson Barboza April 25th in Nebraska. And at this time, I was on vacation. I was injured. That's why I was out there. And I was thinking that was just too soon. I wasn't even coming back to the States for another week or two. And then I was like, by the time I get into practice, I don't even know how I'll feel with my injury. So I said the soonest I want to fight is like mid-May to possibly June or July. And then I found out the UFC was coming to San Diego. And so I was like, okay, I guess I could really, try to get on this card if possible. And actually, I found out, yeah, just online. I was on the phone with my manager when this was put out there, and I was asking him about possible dates, possible opponents. And then my phone was blowing up, and I opened Instagram, and I think I saw it on yours, actually. I was like, oh, they announced this fight. They never even asked me, so that fight, I felt kind of bad, just because I saw people were excited for the fight. And I said, I'm not opposed to the fight. I'm really not opposed to the fight. But they have to ask me. I never got a call. I never got asked to fight on that date or against him there. And I just saw people like, oh, I'm going to buy tickets to this. And I was like, I felt bad because I was like, I don't even have a bout agreement. They haven't even asked me to fight in Oklahoma. And supposedly it was, going down. So I'm, I was doing a few interviews and I was just telling people because they were asking me about the Barboza fight and how my training camp's going. And I'm like, there is no training camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know it's been turbulent times right now, and it's kind of hard to like pin down who you're going to fight next and all that. But has there been any advancement since that? Like since that happened, and you spoke to your manager, have you guys like proceeded with the idea of fighting Barbosa, or what has happened since then?
Yeah, no, there hasn't been any word just because of everything that's going on. I think they were just so concerned about the fights that were, confirmed, and then they had to postpone those. And I think they were worrying about the big April 18th fight. So there was just nothing further that my managers discussed with the UFC. I also have one fight left on my contract. So the whole thing with that is I was saying I will fight anybody. It just has to make sense, because from a business standpoint and what I'm trying to accomplish, if Barboza were to come down to featherweight, it it's high risk for not much of a reward, right? Like he comes down, say he beats me, then he takes my spot and they'll probably push him, fight at someone else. He wins that, maybe push him for a title fight. For me, I win. I stay where I'm at, or move back in the rankings, like what we've been seeing happen after I win fights. So I don't know, but if it just has to make sense. But I've said the whole time I want someone in front of me that's going to get me closer to a title fight.
So I want to say if they come to you with Barbosa again, but even with Fight Island and the travel ban restrictions in Brazil, I mean, even when they were going to proceed with the events in California and Tachipas, it seemed like all the fighters that were competing on UFC 250, all the Brazilians were forced to pull out of their cards. Obviously Aldo and then Cruz was going to replace him. So I don't know if a Barbosa fight would be possible for you at this time, even if they do proceed with Fight Island, just with the current status of the travel ban and everything. But if things do settle or we just don't have UFC events until everything's back to normal, would you be open to the Barbosa fight?
Yeah, no, I would. Like I said, I'm not opposed to it, but it just has to make sense, And in that case, whether there's something in there, I beat him, then I get this, or
Okay.
financially, if it'll set me up for later on, then of course, yeah, then I'm open to it, but it has to make sense, I'm not just gonna. He's a threat. He's a dangerous fighter. But it seems like I'm fighting all these people behind me, or I'm always the person when someone's come down to 55s, and I'm the one to stay there when I want to move. I do want to move forward. But yeah, I'm not opposed to it. Just it has to make sense.
And like I said, because if they do make Fight Island happen and there's travel ban restrictions and you've got certain fighters that can't leave country, so we've been seeing some interesting fights being put together real quickly out of nowhere. So when you look ahead of you, there are a lot of guys that aren't matched up, but we're kind of getting a gauge of maybe they're going to go Ortega Zombie and there's Zabid, there's Yair. Is there a certain guy ahead of you in the rankings that you'd like to fight if we're up to you?
Yeah, I was always just saying like anyone in the top three, top five, someone that's going to get me closer. But with the Fight Island, and even I know what you're saying with all the restrictions. When they were going to have the fights at Tachi, I was willing just to, take some type of short notice fight. So I know I'm saying like, I want to fight up that's going to get me closer to a title fight. And maybe if fights don't happen until after this, the coronavirus is all cleared up, then so be it. But if it was a short notice fight and just kind of put a fight together, then just depending on the opponent, I would do it most likely. I would just have to talk to my team and coaches and manager, of course, but they all, Sean knows my answer a lot of time. If he throws out a name, just calls me, he knows my answer, but I do have to run it by my team.
The matchup with Barbosa, how do you see it if it does materialize eventually when things settle? How do you see that fight playing out?
Yeah, so the Barboza fight, if it actually goes down, No, Barboza is a dangerous opponent. He's a threat, of course. He's fought the who's who, but I've also fought the who's who. You know, I've fought guys that have been, you know, in the top five at lightweight. They've come down. I beat them. I've you know, beat guys in the featherweight division that were in the top five. Um, you know, number one contenders at the time, and or fought for the title. And you know, I don't know. It'd be a tough fight. A fight's a fight. Anything can happen. But you know, I'm betting on myself every time. And you know, I have the training partners, and I have the resources to emulate and train for any opponent. And I would definitely be ready, though. You know, that's the case. And who knows how Barboza is a big a big lightweight, you know, and so it's like I'm just curious if how the weight cut would affect him. You know what I mean? Because I know how it feels, and I feel like he's, you know, he's taller than me. I'm a lot shorter, so it's just I'm just curious how he would react to that type of weight cut. You know, and again, I think they're playing off of Aldo because they saw Aldo drop down to bantamweight, and he looked great. You know, and he performed really well. So I think they're kind of uh, basing their decisions off of that. And I think he's working with the same nutritionist or dietitian, whatever it may be. So yeah, no, I'm up for the fight. I'm not opposed to it. It just has to make sense.
And before you were saying you had a fight left in your contract. Have you gotten an opportunity to visit that, or with all these turbulent times, you haven't? Your manager hasn't had a chance.
To what?
With you said you have one fight left on your contract, right? Have you been able to do any negotiations with the UFC, or with these times has it not been? Have you not gotten the chance yet?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing with the Barboza fight.
Mhm.
They were trying to, you know, renegotiate that, and so that's where I keep saying if it makes sense. You know, obviously if I get a bigger contract and something that I want, then of course, you know, I'll take that fight, or I'll fight whoever moving forward. Because at the end of the day, I do want to stay with the UFC. It's the you know, the biggest platform and the biggest stage there is in MMA, and so I want to stay with the UFC, but it's just yeah, we'll come to some type of agreement. You know, I don't plan on going anywhere. But with that, a lot of people kept asking me, well, why'd you take that Allen fight? You know, there was no one else for me to fight. I wanted to fight because I haven't fought since July, and it's gonna be another. You know, it's looking like another year I'll be sitting on the sidelines before I get a fight again, and that's I was just going to fight out my contract when I took that Allen fight. And so that's what the whole thing that people just didn't understand why I accepted that. But moving forward, like I said, I want to stay with the UFC, and so they're just negotiating a new contract, and we'll see when all this clears up.
All right, I'll leave you with a couple more, and I appreciate your time. How do you proceed now? You said it, you know, it's a pretty tough cut for you for 45. So do you kind of train like you have a fight, sort of? Because you guys might get the call at any time should they maybe come up with it with Fight Island and it happens.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm doing my part. I'm sticking to like a pretty strict diet, and I'm getting in my my runs, lifts, and working with the coaches. It's obviously not a training camp, but I'm staying in shape and doing what I can during this time. So if I do get a call on some type of notice, I would like, who knows, 3-4 weeks or something like that. Then I could possibly, depending on the opponent, and if it made sense, then yeah, of course I could take advantage of it. But yeah, I think speaking on behalf of most fighters, there are no training camps. These are some weird times. Like we're not doing all the practices that we typically do. Um, not sparring. We're not doing a lot of things. So it is hard. Like, but the good thing is, when I first got in the UFC and when I was on like the regional scene towards the end of that, I was always injured. So I wasn't, I could never do a lot of these practices, and I was always just running, eating well, and like hitting mitts, and I would spar, and that's all I was doing for a handful of fights. Because my biggest thing was I just needed to get to the fight, and once I get to the fight, I'll be fine. I'll kind of, I had some like rib injuries. I was like, well, I'll test it out in the fight, but I have to get there. So it kind of brings me back to that. There aren't a lot of injuries. I feel great. So if I were to get a fight on Fight Island and say I got a 4 week notice and I did some of the training I used to, as long as I'm in good shape, and I can press the pace for 15 to 25 minutes. I know how to fight. I've got all those rounds in. Coming up in the sport, I've wrestled, since I was a young child. So it's like I have the mat time, I have the rounds, I have the experience, I know how to fight. Yeah, I'll be ready. So I'm just sitting back, but I am doing my part, and I will be ready if an opportunity presents itself.
And do you think Fight Island happens? Like, if you could give a percentage of it happening within the next month or so, do you think it'll happen, it'll materialize, and you guys will get to compete on it?
I don't know if I do like to bet, and if it's kind of hard because I feel like if you said, will it happen within a month? I don't know. I don't know. I kind of don't think it'll be up and running and fights will be going in a month, but who knows? I wouldn't doubt Dana White either. You know what I mean? Look at what he did to get, the April 18th fight like locked down, and they probably went through so much. And he did it, and then he was just asked to step down because the governor didn't want him to go through with it. So I wouldn't doubt the guy. I do believe him. But I don't know. I kind of find it hard to, if we said by May 15th or May 12th or 10th that there'll be fights, I would probably bet there wouldn't be. But will there be 6 weeks out? Possibly.
And Dana said as kind of like a thank you that he, as soon as things were back up and running 100%, that he was going to do an event in Tachi Pass. Is it safe to say that you want in on that card?
Oh, of course, anywhere in California, and especially, man, it's so close to home. So it's just like I would have that much more people come, and I do want to fight in Vegas. So another thing I was thinking about, I was like, if when I was saying I wanted to fight in May, June, or July, I was even possibly, if I could have held out and waited till the July card, International Fight Week. I would have done that as well because I've never fought in Vegas still, and it's so close to home. It would give everyone an excuse to go out there. I would have a huge turnout, and it'd be a fun time. I was also thinking maybe that's when Fight Island could possibly start, International Fight Week, but he says it'll be up and running sooner. But I'd fight at Tachi for sure. I went down and watched a lot of fights there, but I never competed in Tachi fights. So yeah, it'd be awesome.